Hey there, welcome back to the Language of Play. As I was about to record, I thought, what is most important to you, my listeners? So I went back to the past episodes and I looked for the topics that you most listened to. As I read the top 15 titles, I looked for the common thread of what your needs are, what your interests are, and that is how I came up with today's topic. Now, nearly all the topics in the top 15 have something to do with connecting with your child and building their speech, language, and listening skills. Now, that is no surprise, is it? Because that is what this podcast is literally about, after all. So today, I'm going to address another conversation that I was in that wraps up these topics, and that was, what is a language-rich environment? What does it actually look like? And since somebody asked me this, that means 100 of you are wondering it. Having a language-rich environment causes our children to build their language skills. It helps them build their speech. It helps them expand their ability to listen well. And when we as adults think about what kinds of things we do in a language-rich environment, then we realize how we are being intentional and how we are impacting our children's speech, language, and listening development. So this episode is going to wrap up many of the topics, I think, that you have been interested in, and I'm going to give a high-level view of these different topics. So please email me at hello@thelanguageofplay.com if there's anything that you think, man, I want you to expand on this. I am so happy to. And also, just a reminder, in the show notes, there is a voice message link that you can click on to make it super easy for yourself. Click on that link and just talk to your computer or phone, and the message will come to me in audio form. How easy is that? I welcome you to utilize that. Does your child have a speech-language delay and you really want them to talk? Do difficult behaviors derail home life and you know the frustration is a communication struggle? Does your child see a speech therapist and you wonder, what do they do and how can I help? If these or similar questions are in your mind, this podcast is for you. Hello, my name is Dinalynn Rosenbusch. I am a speech-language pathologist that has worked with children from birth to 21 for 3 decades. And in my classrooms, I see you wanting to connect with the heart of your child, but their speech and language skills create a barrier. So if you have a kiddo that has difficult behaviors, needs to expand their language or learn to say speech sounds, and maybe even receives speech therapy, stay tuned, because in this podcast, you will learn how to use your daily life as a tool to communication practice and how to do that practice. You will become confident knowing you are making the difference you want to make. And you will hear success stories of parents who have navigated these struggles already. We'll do this all while focusing on building deep, meaningful connection and confidence in your kiddo. So grab a cup of coffee along with a notebook and pen. It's time to speak in the way your child's brain understands. And that is the language of play. All right, before we get started, I want to read a review. Sarah Rose Linda from the United States writes, one of my favorites, and puts 5 stars. And then she says, what a delightful podcast. I'm so excited as a busy parent to find such great information on hand when I'm on a walk or on a drive. Thanks and highly recommended. So thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it. And listeners, if you have not yet left a review, I would appreciate so much you doing that. It encourages me super lots to read what listeners have to say. And even more importantly than that, please share this podcast with other people who are also living or working with children. Do you find yourself looking on Google at charts of child development and you wonder, how is my child doing? And you look again and you look again, just hoping that they are in that normal range finally, or they're just at the bottom of the normal and you're wondering if they're going to fall out or if they're going to be in, and you're really, what you're doing is you're trying to encourage yourself that your child is doing okay. I want to say that if you are in that space where you have concerns and worries, follow your gut. Even if you've gone to your pediatrician and they look at the charts too and they say, well, your child's doing okay because they're in the norms. Don't worry about them. But still, you have that niggle inside of you. You are wondering. This is the space where parents can make such a difference for their children. And so few parents actually step into that because they don't know what to do to make the change that they want. If what you are wanting for your child is better speech or better language, better listening, better communication, better connection, this is what I do here at the Language of Play, and I am here to help you. If you would like to have a conversation with me to discuss what is going on with your child, what are your concerns? Should you actually let it go and wait? Or is there something that you can do to jump in and give your child that communication that they need so that those meltdowns they have when you don't understand their message or they're frustrated because they can't find the words, those meltdowns, you know the ones that you just feel for them because it is a communication frustration. If you want help to be able to change that dynamic in your home and give your child the language that you really believe is accessible to them, but you only need somebody to show you how, and you don't want to wait. You don't want to wait for a year or 2 years until they're going to qualify for speech pathology. That is what I do. I can help you with that. You do not need to have the tantrums that are communication frustration. There are easy, real strategies that you can use in a daily basis in your normal life to expand language. And if this is something that you want, contact me by going into the show notes and you will find a strategy session link where we can talk about how we could work together to get you to meet those aspirations that you have for you and your child. Because it's real, it can be done, and it's not hard when you know how. So contact me either by scheduling that appointment for yourself, or, as always, you can email me at hello@thelanguageofplay.com. All right, now let's get into today's episode that is a list of language-rich environment cues. What does it look like if you have a language-rich environment? And these are things that help children grow their language skills naturally through connection, through conversation, through play. And so let's jump in and let's talk about each one. Now, no matter what it is that I say, always know that there's more. There's always more things that we can do. But here are some really common things to do in your home that I think is very accessible for parents. The first thing is books. We always think about books. And I just thought of something I forgot, which is go get a pen and paper, because this is one of the episodes that you are going to want to take notes on. All right, the first thing is books. We want books to be accessible and read often, not just at bedtime, but we want our kids to have books available to them to thumb through, to play with, to touch, to try to figure out what's right side up, left side, underside, overside, all the different ways to hold a book, open it, shut it, and play with it. So the touching of books for the very little ones, yes, I know that they're going to wreck them. They won't wreck all of them. That's why there's board books for those little ones. But, they chew on them. That's what they do. But having books around is more than just the story that is in the book. And one of the mistakes I see parents make is they feel like a book needs to be read the way a book was written. Some kids are ready to listen to that, and great. If the child wants to listen to the story as written, go ahead, absolutely. But there are many kids that really get interested in a picture that they're looking at in the book, but they're not necessarily paying attention to the story. A language-rich environment means that if the child is attending to the picture in the story and they're really only interested in that picture, that you will expand on that picture so that the child learns the language around that which they are focused on and interested in. It's not about what we are paying attention to or we want to talk about. It is about giving them language for what they're paying attention to. So if you're writing these things down, the first one is books are accessible and read often. The second thing goes along with it. Adults are narrating daily routines, what the child is paying attention to. The child is continuously getting language from the adult in the environment, talking about what is actually occurring and what the child is paying attention to. Not necessarily where you want the child to go. I'm not talking about giving instructions. I'm not talking about correction. And I'm definitely not talking about asking them questions. I am talking about narrating what they are paying attention to. So if you're putting shoes on, they're attending to what you're doing to their feet. So then you get to say, we're putting your shoes on. One foot, now here is the other, for example. Another thing that a language-rich environment includes is vocabulary being dripped in all over what's going on with that child. For example, when the child says, it's a bear, you say, it's a big brown bear. When the child looks out the car window and sees equipment and says trucks, you say, yes, there's an excavator and a dump truck and a front end loader. You give more vocabulary for what the child is paying attention to. We don't just call all of those big equipment items trucks. We can give them the actual name that they are. My first example was big brown bear, and that would be descriptive language. So here's some vocabulary that gives description in what the child is talking about, and then the other part of vocabulary would be giving the specific vocabulary. What is that thing actually called that they're talking about? So they don't use non-specific pronouns like stuff, things, that, this. We don't want our children talking like that. We want them to use the words that match what they're actually trying to say. And if we practice that with them, we give them more vocabulary and they soak it in and they start to use it too. Another part of a language-rich environment includes back and forth conversation. Now, in the era of screens, we have people looking at their phones while they're answering a child. Or if a child asks for water, it's not uncommon for us parents, and I'm guilty too. This is something I try very hard not to ever do, and yet it leaks in sometimes. Put your phone down. When you're attending to your child, look at your child so that your conversation is eye to eye, me to you, and we're talking about the same topic and we're paying attention to the same topic. So what is happening is that if you're looking at your phone, your child asks for water, you fill the water, the child takes the water away and leaves and drinks it. Now, no language or very little language happened in that exchange. That is causing a deterioration of the interactive learning that we want our children to have. Put your phone down, child asks for water, and you'd say, oh, honey, what color cup do you want? And then the child answers blue. And then you say, here you go. And maybe you give the cup to the child empty, which forces the child to say, water, please. And so then you go back and you say, oh, here's the water for you. Thank you, Mom. And that was an example of back and forth. And your topic is the same. You're on the topic of getting that water. And you're both paying attention to the cup. You're both paying attention to the water. You're both paying attention to the social cues of thank you and please. This is critically important to practice in this day and age when we have so much screen distraction and interruption. Now, if you're writing things down, the next thing you're going to write down is back and forth conversation. On the lines of back and forth conversation, I want to say open-ended questions. Now, the difference between open-ended questions and our quick rapid-fire questions is if your child's able to answer it in a yes and no, it was not an open-ended question. You want to ask questions like, what did you think about that? What do you think will happen next? Why do you think he did that? Do you like it? Why do you like it? Tell me more. Those kind of phrases are open-ended so that the child has to expand and tell you what they're really thinking, which causes them to stop and think about what language goes with this answer. Now, that does require that you have to patiently listen to the answer that they give you. Otherwise, they're not going to keep answering you if you don't listen. If you want to teach them how to listen, we show them how to listen. And this is part of that back and forth conversation, but it's another ramped up part. Asking open-ended questions are wonderful for teaching our kids how to expand, but only in the context of us actually listening to what they say. And sometimes it's laborious to listen because they can be slow sometimes. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. And sometimes they repeat themselves a lot. But this is part of the learning. By now you're getting the idea that having a language-rich environment has a lot more to do with the adults in the environment and how we use language than it has to do with the actual environment itself. Language-rich environment, sometimes people think are having the toys around that kids can play with and talk about. But as you've seen, it's really what do the adults do in the environment to create the language-rich environment. So here's the next thing I'm going to bring up. So if you're writing things down, I want you to write the last one, open-ended questions. And here's the next one. Play is full of storytelling and role play. Now, what do I mean by that? And I want you to think of dolls and action figures. I want you to think of taking your kitchen tools and using them in a personified way so that the kitchen items are talking to each other, like your fork is talking to your spoon. And that would be how the adults take the environment that they're in and make it into a language-rich environment in your everyday moments. So when it comes time to have your child set the table, because all day, every day, of course, they're learning the skills of life, aren't they? We want them to do all of these different chores and tasks because it's all part of learning how to live life. So when we give them a fork and have the fork talk to them, find me a plate and a spoon, put me on the table. We take a simple task we're going to give them anyway. We turn it into role playing, and then the children will automatically start to play back. This expands their language. It creates a language-rich environment from a plain old normal environment. Put this on the table is an instruction. Having the fork start asking for their partners, like the plate and the spoon, where are my friends, creates the language-rich environment where imagination builds and language builds on that. The next thing to write down would be songs, rhymes, and wordplay are part of your normal day. So maybe you're going to sing the transition to get them in the car. And maybe you're going to give them rhyming words and silly songs while they come to the dinner table. All of that helps them get the sound of language, the rhythm of language, play with words, play with rhymes. That is part of their language-rich environment. Now, I've said a lot of things, and if you are writing them down, I've got 2 more. The next thing I want to bring up is feelings. When children express their feelings, I want you to help them express them with words, because we are trying to come up with vocabulary. We are coming up with the words that match the feelings, and you can say things to your child like, you're frustrated because it's not working. Let's figure this out together. You're giving them a solution that is not really a solution, and yet it is, because you're telling them, we're going to figure it out together. And you're giving them the word frustrated for the feeling word that's going on. You're helping them solve the problem in the sense of, they can identify it. They're frustrated because it's not working, and the solution being seen, being heard, being validated, and having you come alongside them so they don't feel alone. All of these wrapped together help them to have the language and the example of the language for when they are frustrated the next time, so that they will have the words to come to you. Because wouldn't it be amazing if when our children are frustrated, they say, I'm frustrated because it's not working. Let's figure it out together. Or can you help me? And they know this language because you've said it so many times. And of course, that would be part of the goal, isn't it? We want our children to use words instead of behaviors when they are frustrated. And it takes many exposures before our children will put that into their own language. The final thing to write down is probably what you're expecting. And that is print is visible. That means the words are visible and purposeful, such as labels on shelves. Maybe their name is above where they hang their coat. Maybe you've got a few labels of what objects are on those objects as they're learning to read, or you want them to identify letters. That is what oftentimes I come across parents thinking is a language-rich environment. But I will say that is a very small portion, and it is helpful. There's no doubt that it's helpful. But it is a very small portion of what makes an environment language-rich. Do it. It's good. But all the other stuff is what gives your child the reciprocity or the back and forth language that builds connection, that builds communication between you and your child. Those labels on their clothes or on their cubby or on the bathtub or wherever you put them, that's great for helping reading growth, for recognizing letters, and to have some dialogue about it. Now, the dialogue about those labels is the language that goes back and forth between people. The labels themselves are great for helping reading, but it's not necessarily part of the foundational practice of having a language-rich environment. So, yes, it's good. Have print visible and purposeful, and that would be your final tip for the day. But it is last, because this time, last is the least important for building language. In summary, here is the list one more time. However, I said it out of order, so I might give it to you in a different order, but it'll be close. Here it is. Books are accessible and read often. Adults narrate daily routines. Vocabulary is dripped intentionally all over your kiddos often. Children hear lots of descriptive language in your vocabulary. You use open-ended questions often. Children are encouraged to express their feelings in words. Back and forth conversation is modeled and experienced often. Their play is full of storytelling and role-playing. And this is when I described using the toys, personified. Songs, rhymes, wordplay, silly words, making up words. This is part of your daily interaction. And finally, having print visible and purposeful in their world is also helpful. And there is your list. All right, there you have it. Simple ways that you can build a language-rich space or language-rich environment, no matter where you are or how tired you actually feel, because you can build just about everything that I said. You can build it into the normal life that you are living in the time that you are living it. And remember, it's not about doing things perfectly. It's about showing up with the intention and giving kids the words and the connection that they need to thrive. So thank you for joining me today. If this episode was helpful or encouraged you, I would love it if you share it with someone else who cares about kids and communication. And until next time, keep playing, keep talking, and keep listening to your kiddo. And as always, you are invited to email me at hello@thelanguageofplay.com, and I would be delighted to talk with you about your kiddo or answer questions. You have links in the show notes to make it exceptionally easy, and I look forward to hearing from you. Hey parents, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who also lives or works with children? I would really appreciate it if you would leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I read every review, and it lights me up to know that this show is making a difference. Then come join my Facebook community, where you'll meet other parents who are dedicated to helping their children grow too. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining me. Now it's time to go. Let's pop our kiddos in the strollers and go look around outdoors and see what we have to talk about